Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to introduce today's episode. Today, you get a short episode about a short story. So it'll be a short interview. If you didn't know that, you can make all the height jokes here if you want. But we're going to talk about the A Touch of Aether, an Urban Fantasy Anthology put out by Three Raven Press. And today we have Jesse James Fain, the outlaw author himself, to talk about his story. But Jesse, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Yeah, hey everybody. I am Jesse James Fain. I go by the Outlaw Author because the branding writes itself. I write military sci-fi, I write urban fantasy, I write epic fantasy, pretty much anything I can squeeze a sword fight, a fist fight, or a gunfight into. I trained a lot of years in all of those things, and I like trying to squeeze a little bit of real-life combat into your fictional experience.
All right. And since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we can't let you escape without the religion questions, tailored, of course, to the topic today. But Big Trouble in Little China, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. That title is a mouthful. Zoo, Warriors from the Magic Mountain.
So for me, it's Big Trouble in Little China. I'm a 90s kid. Born 1990, and so I was a little late for Buckaroo Banzai. I know my friends that are just a little bit older absolutely love it. But Big Trouble in Little China is absolutely hilarious to me. It's an absolute classic, and did help start my love of the urban fantasy genre.
Outstanding. And if you didn't know, Zoo, Warriors from the Magic Mountain is what inspired Big Trouble in Little China. So I had to include it. Most people don't know that because I didn't until I did the Google prep for today. All right. And because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Hellboy, Bright, or The Crow?
Those are all three awesome. And it's difficult for me to pick between the three of them. If I had to pick one, I'm going to go The Crow. I'm going to go The Crow. Brandon Lee was awesome. I'm a big martial arts movie guy. Like, when you ask me Big Trouble or all of those, like, I want to say The Last Dragon. But it's not quite urban fantasy enough for what we're doing here. But the fantastic martial arts, it was dark. It had that wonderful 90s, like, new metal kind of feel to it. That's definitely my vibe.
Okay. Urban fantasy is an interesting. We'll get over that definition in a minute, but because we do things in sets of three, the 10th Kingdom, Once Upon a Time, or the Bureau of Magical Things, and I've seen them all, and they're all good.
Yeah. 10th Kingdom for me. Only one I saw the most of. So that's definitely the pick for me.
Yeah, I remember watching that as it came out as a weekly thing on TV with the family, and my mom and I, we watched that together, and then we had the VHS of it at first, and now it's out obviously in DVD, but when it first came out, VHS was still a thing, and I really dig it. The character that played the werewolf was awesome, the way he did the acting. So you should check that out, dear listener. You'll thank us later. And for our Australian listeners, all two of you, we had to give a nod for the Bureau of Magical Things. So halfway decent. Watch that with the kiddos as well. All right. And in case you missed it, dear listener, all of these movies had one underlying theme, and that is they are rated for the best urban fantasy stories out there. But before we do that, let's talk about the anthology that brought us together. A Touch of Aether, an urban fantasy anthology, is the title, or A Touch of Aether, if you want to keep it short. In the heart of the city, magic is real, and it's dangerous. Get ready for a wild ride through dark streets where monsters roam, magic crackles, and heroes fight shadows at every turn. From wizards to vampires, gods to shapeshifters, these stories will drag you into a world where the impossible is just another day. The secrets of the city are about to be unleashed. Are you ready? I feel like we need fight music now from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, we absolutely the perfect kick in.
Yeah, we got to do that when we do ads on Amazon for your author page at the end. When your eye catches it, it should go automatically start playing the music.
Yep.
All right, so What is urban fantasy? So we can start by defining our terms.
So, to me, urban fantasy is taking all of the wonderful fantasy elements, wizards, vampires, werewolves, anything that has this magical connection to it that we say doesn't exist today, and cramming it into the modern urban experience, the city experience. And you know, I can let that definition kind of wibble wobble a little bit because sometimes it's not 100% modern. Sometimes it's like 1600s, but anything where you take an enlightened society and then reveal, oh, hey, no, magic's real, some supernatural element is real, and it gets involved and is part of the story.
And what is it about urban fantasy that appeals to you?
For me, and this is me specifically, and it's going to be kind of a weird one, but I talked earlier in my intro about like sword fights, fist fights, gun fights. You get all of those things in urban fantasy. Urban fantasy allows you to take the modern fighter, soldier, the gangster on the street with the 9mm on his hip. You get to bring those people in and put them either with or against or modify them with these wonderful, magical, fantastic elements. And I love that. I love the Harry Dresden feel of the wizard with a 44. That just absolutely appeals to me.
Would Weird Western then be considered urban fantasy because that's enlightened fight? I'm just thinking about the gunfight with Weird Western. Could that be urban fantasy then?
It could, but at least from my experience with Weird West, and I've written a little bit of it, it leans off the Western themes, and really leans into the Western and spaghetti Western, slow burn, build up to the big showdown kind of deal. But you're adding in these fantastical elements. There's definitely some genre cross there, but a lot of Weird West is also out west during that like very wild. That's why we call it the Wild West. This very outdoor, not really urban society. So I think you could make the argument either way.
So I guess that'd be a case by case, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so back on track with the urban fantasy in this anthology, A Touch of Aether. What is your story in the anthology called?
So my story is called Dead Wolf, and I guess I should give a little bit of maybe a teaser, not spoiling too much. But Dead Wolf follows Leonidas Vanagander, who is a retired 18D. For people that don't do the military thing, 18D is the Special Forces medic, specifically. And so Leo has retired from the United States Sorcerers Legion, which is their version of the magical army, as this medical sergeant, and has come home to work at the local hospital in my version of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay. And what can you tell us about the main character?
So like I said, Leo's an 18D. He's now retired. He got really tired of the classical like GWAT veteran experience. It's funny because like we've talked about Children of Fire before, my other mill sci-fi story, and Children of Fire is a veteran ready to get out, and Leo is the veteran who's gotten out, and they're kind of spiritual successors. I wrote them one after the other. He was really sick of the what's the work appropriate version of the green weenie, of the administrative struggles that happen when you're a veteran, which I didn't experience firsthand, but I have tons of veteran friends and family, and it's really what inspired the story. So Leo's tired. He's a fantastic healer. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler because this is going to happen in the first 5 minutes, but Leo also was part of a specialty unit, and the specialty unit is called the Demon Deltas. And the Demon Deltas were medics that are not only trained to heal, but his true specialty art is necromancy. So he comes home and starts working at the hospital, stitching people back together, and wants to stop being a monster because people don't have a very good traditional view of necromancers. So he's kind of trying to make up for some of the things that happened while he was in the service.
So essentially a redemption tale.
It is Really, in a way, that's kind of how it starts. But the big thing for Leo is that he's really struggling to find where he belongs, because part of him heals and part of him really, really hurts. And so when you come home and you've held death on your hands this entire time, and now you don't do that anymore, to quote a classic movie line, it doesn't just turn off. And so Leo is dealing with all of that in the most healthy way he knows possible, but is struggling with the fact that part of him is a destroyer and part of him is a creator, and he doesn't really know how to nurture both at the same time.
What was the inspiration for your story?
Definitely like watching my brother and my best friends get back from Afghanistan, and Iraq. That was a big part of it. There's also like military novels like Storm of Steel or With the Old Breed, which are classic memoirs of soldiers in like World War I and World War II. And of course, there's all the urban fantasy classics, Monster Hunter International, Dresden Files, all of those things, and maybe a little bit of Platoon, even.
Okay. Does this story fit into a larger universe?
Absolutely. So I am working on the novel for Leo right now. This is kind of the character introduction for the world and who Leo is. I have been talking about in all the other episodes the Midnight Sea, the Holy Diver and the Midnight Sea project that I'm working on, and Leo is the founding novel for that. So this will tie into a much larger universe that includes other characters, other settings, even other worlds.
Okay. Do you have to be familiar with that yet as unpublished work to enjoy and understand this standalone short story?
No, so this short story is actually what starts everything. So this is your introduction to Leo. This is what will get you to know him. And if for some reason you miss this one and find my novel, there will be a quick, explanation within the text that will get you caught up at least on the major events of what happens here in the short.
Okay. And we did promise you, dear listener, a short story or short interview for a short story. So would you live in this world if you could?
Yeah, absolutely. This is home. This is going to feel like a modern world. You don't lose all those amenities and everything like that. The only difference is that every once in a while there's somebody who's really special. And a lot of urban fantasy doesn't have your magic out in the open. It doesn't have you out, like, if you were walking around in your day to day, you would not know that magic was real. It's only these special people that have these special jobs or were born into it that know that, no, really, all these things do exist. They're not just legends. In my world specifically, it is recognized and known. And that will even become a factor later because there's going to be struggles with things like governmental interference and legislation, and things like that that drive the story moving forward from here. Leo himself was part of a specifically dedicated magic army. And one of the other secondary characters, his best friend Jason, they served together, and Jason's now a detective with the Fort Worth PD. So they are, literally people with these specialties are working in everyday jobs.
Given that you're adding magic, etc., and you're making knock-on effects of what that would do to the world, how much of modern world outside of that change is going to look the same? Are the world events the same, etc., or has everything changed?
So I tried to make it very similar to a world that you would recognize even maybe just like 5 years ago. 9/11 still happens. There's still a huge war in the Middle East. That's a very big driving factor in where the story goes in Dead Wolf. So it's going to be very familiar still. Now, the people, the places, the struggles from there are going to change. And there's still, going to be some surprises here and there because I have to take into account some of the things that might have been a little bit different in history if how can I put this? If medicine actually worked for the native tribes, the Indian removal process would have been a whole lot more difficult. Things like that. Those are going to be a little bit different. But overall, the major world history and the things that you know, they're going to be comfortable to you. The magic is going to happen on the page.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Is there anything about your story in this collection that we didn't cover that you think to pitch it to people one last time?
I think that the coolest thing about this antho and my story in particular is that a lot of urban fantasy tends to be, I'm trying to find the right way to put this. It tends to be written from a lot of people that don't study or never went through like maybe really heavy combat training. And so the magic tends to be a lot of the focus. A big like pride point and thing I wanted to do in this story, and I'll shout out Kay Anders' story, the Foxtrot Protocol, in this too, is that our dudes are straight up killers with the weapon in their hands before the magic even starts. And we wanted to do this really cool combination of how a fight works when dudes can throw fireballs, but they still have a Kalashnikov. And so that's a big pride point for me, is that the action's really cool. There's lots of emotional layers. I like to call this a reverse revenge tale, because it is all about, instead of me writing about revenge all the time, this one's about the cost of revenge, and the cost of choices that maybe other people made for you. The cost on a people of when its government kind of gets out of control.
Okay. Now, have you read the other books or the other shorts in the anthology?
I have. We get that's the pleasure of being an author. You get an advanced reader copy to double check everybody's stories, and we help edit each other and make sure that we all get to, like, hey, you didn't miss a comma, or there's not this sentence that looks wonky or anything like that. So I did read over everyone else's while I was editing my own for final print. So I have been blessed. There's a lot of killer stories in here. Shammy and Melissa are friends and write awesome stuff. Kay wrote this really killer story. Phil's a fantastic editor, and on top of being a fantastic editor, is a really good writer as well. And William Joseph Roberts always delivers. So there's, everybody in here did a really great job. There's standouts for me from my personal taste, but this is a great anthem.
Okay. And we'll try to get some of the other guests on, dear listener, to talk about, or the other authors to talk about their stories. The anthology, we're recording this on the 7th of March, probably air it tonight or tomorrow, depending on my schedule. This anthology actually is in pre-order right now. It will publish on March 28th, I believe.
That's correct.
And so you won't be able to get it right away, but you can definitely click the pre-order button. And if you do that, you don't have to think about it. It will just automatically deliver to your Kindle on the appropriate day. Do you know if this is going wide, or is this in KU at first?
I believe this is going to have KU. I have to double check that, but most of the time they are.
Okay. Well, we'll when this goes live, just so we don't forget, dear listener, we will drop a link in the Blasters and Blades Facebook group, so you can check it out if you didn't yet. And then if it's in KU and such, we'll be able to tell you at that point. So with that, this is the part where I remind you, dear listener, please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part. It's especially true with independent and small press creators. And since this is an anthology, instead of just putting, I liked all the stories, if there are any that called out to you, that helps. Definitely will stroke the ego of whatever author you're shouting out. So that's cool too. But yeah, leave a review and share it with the world. So with that, Jesse, how can listeners find you?
Easiest way is going to be outlawauthor.com. That will link you to all of the other stuff. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, Substack. I think my Substack's a lot of fun, talking about random topics, including some of the themes that inspired Dead Wolf. And if you really want to add me on Facebook, you can. That's my personal page, so you're not going to get the filtered version of me. You're going to get a lot more lot more of me, which can be a lot more aggressive. So, by all means, come hang out, come have fun, talk with me about urban fantasy or whatever, whatever. I'm in most genres. So yeah, that's how people can find me.
All right. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We link to our Spotify account, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page, our email, blastersbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Save it for the appropriate stuff. Send the shenanigans over there to Madam Stabby Stab over there on Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-host duly caffeinated. We will force the coffee down their gullet. We'll waterboard them with Java. That's what we're going to do, people. See, I stumbled over my words, and this is my attempt at a recovery, but we're going to waterboard them with coffee. Maybe we'll even cool it off first. I don't know. Depends on how generous Jesse's feeling that day. But if you want some of that coffee so you can experience it with them, you could waterboard yourself with Coffee Brand Coffee, gourmet coffee experience. When you buy that, you use the link in the show notes, the code podcast grunts, you get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback, and you too can experience some of that Java waterboarding, Java boarding, I guess. I don't know. We got to work on that one, people. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, thanks for coming on, Jesse. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course.
And with that, we hit the end button. People, wait for